Alright, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Baron, and today we are discussing a few pretty awesome developments in our War Thunder community. Tanks at IgroMir. And IgroMir, as you probably have heard about, is a pretty big trade show over in Russia. And what you're looking at right now is Gaijin's setup for War Thunder. And yeah, what you're looking at right now is a Panzer IV. In all of its beauty, a real-life, actual Panzer IV. This isn't one of those wooden mock-ups that people used in training exercises during World War II. No, this is an actual tank, more than likely from the Kubinka Tank Museum over in Russia. So Gaijin kind of just went above and beyond, as we've kind of seen them do many, many times before. But in this trade show, I was really hoping for this. Gaijin could really use a lot of big publicity. Because they have a very, very good product. But part of the whole business concept nowadays is you can have a pretty damn good product, but if you don't promote it, not to say Gaijin isn't promoting, but if you don't promote it and you don't promote it properly, you won't get as much traction as, say, the other day I was watching ESPN and I saw an advertisement for another tank game. I found that pretty interesting. Granted, the amount of time at which War Thunder's been out compared to the other game, to term it playfully, has been multiple years. So, given the success, but the fact that we're seeing, kind of going back to this, we're seeing tanks. And a lot of you here for screenshots, and they will be coming momentarily with a lot of news, discussion, and just speculation. But I'm just so amazed by this. The fact that they have actual tanks, and if you look very closely, you can see a T-34-85 in the background behind that lady who's hard at work making an amazing looking presentation. And what I've heard is she is doing it all herself. She's even driving the tanks. And on her lunch break she got drunk and was driving this Panzer IV around, so she had to do it again. And that may be true or maybe not. Who knows? Alright, let's get into it. So now we are looking at the kind of booth outlay. And if you look at M1 and M2, both of them are Gaijin booths. M2 is for some skydiving game, which I'm pretty interested in learning more about, and that is going to use the Oculus Rift. But M1 is basically what we just saw, kind of. This is going to be the War Thunder booth. It is big, and it is big because, you know what, there's going to be two freaking real tanks in there. So there you go. Here's another picture of the kind of floor, I guess, and you can see them setting it up. So I guess that lady was fired after she was driving that Panzer IV around, but now they hired a couple more people. And if you look in the background, you can see that T-34-85, and that thing is a beast. Pretty cool looking. Now, quick note about the T-34-85. It was originally built to counter the Tiger I tank, because they needed something that could penetrate it decently well. So that is why they added that 85mm cannon on it. And they actually kind of took a play out of the Germans' handbook and said, hey, we have this anti-aircraft cannon which is pretty good at penetrating the Tiger. Let's strap it to a tank chassis. Why not a very reliable tank chassis that we have been producing crap tons? Oh, we'll put it on the T-34. And boom. And another interesting fact about T-34-85 is it fought in World War II and Korea. So it's well within the scope. It kind of had a very long life, so I'd imagine there would be different upgraded versions and modified versions for your choice. There won't, so I am expecting more than one different model to play with. And these things fought against the Tiger tanks, as I said, Panther tanks. In Korea, they fought against Sherman Easy 8s, Pattons, Pershings, in British heavy tanks like Centurions, Churchills, and Cromwells, all around. If you're a Soviet tanker, you're going to really enjoy that tank. So here's another kind of, I guess, perspective on the booth size, and you can look at this little blue setup. I'm not really sure what that is. It looks mobile. Gonna be pretty interesting, but look at those tanks in the background. Awesome. Really cool looking trade floor. And here we have the first screenshot, and yes, it is an IS-3. And the big giveaway right there is that hemispherical or round turret, which is trademark of most later Soviet tanks. When you look at them, they just look powerful. And the circular turret, I don't know what it is. It's very aesthetically pleasing when you look at it. It's pretty beast. And then there's two things about this turret which will have an impact on your gameplay. And the first is that with the rounded turret, it does two things. It improves protection, because I mean, look at it. There's no hard angles on it really, or it minimizes hard angles, or flat surfaces, which are easier to penetrate. So with it being rounded, there's a greater chance of bouncing and less chance of penetration from an enemy's shots. The second of which is, you look at tanks like the Hetzer, the T-34, and then to a lesser extent, but with the Hetzer and T-34 specifically, and then with the IS-3's turret, the more sloping that you put on a tank's surface, the greater impact it has on the internal part of the tank, inside of it. And that means, like, if you think about it, if you're trying to do something and you're cramped, you will more than likely be less effective at it than if you had ample room to do those same tasks. So with this turret, you have more cramping, and so I'm not even sure if it's a 2 or 3 person turret. But regardless, it is cramped and it had issues as a result. So granted, it was very, very well protected, but there's drawbacks. The more protection you have when you incorporate sloping in smaller silhouettes and stuff like that, it has an effect. And that, I'm sure that will have an impact on gameplay. I'm not entirely sure what that would be. At a more simple function, it could be simply that you reload slower, because there's each of your crew members are kind of doing more jobs, or they will be doing them at a less effective rate given cramping. That's pure speculation, but that's kind of my theory and my guess as of now. Another cool fact about the IS-3 is you may think, oh, this might be the top of the line Russian tank, and to an extent that may be true. However, the IS-3 was modernized, and I think it was modernized anywhere between 1952 and 1957. So depending what kind of date they use, an IS-3M or a modernized version would be available to be played in-game. So I would imagine that would be the top of the line, barring any premiums and prototypes. I would imagine that would be top of the line. Now you can't see it, but in the front of this is an amazing pike, is what they called it. A pike, almost like a spear tip looking thing, like the way they sloped it and stuff. This thing was not easily penetrated from the front, and I'm not sure it ever was. So moving on, we have the KV-1, and this thing is just a beast. This will probably be one of the biggest, that and the T-34, but the KV-1 you'll more likely get first. When you get this as a Russian tanker, you are going to be filled with joy, because this is your big brawler, your slugger. That thing goes out there and just takes shots to the face, takes haymakers to its jaw, and shrugs them off at early tier. As it did in World War II. The Germans, anything like short howitzer or like short cannons, anything that wasn't really a high velocity firing gun couldn't do much work except when you pulled right behind it and shot it in the engine block from behind. It's very heavily armored, and there's a lot of variants on it. So you should see a couple different versions, as more and more patches come in. But even at first, you may see one or two. Not really sure. Pure speculation right there. But some of the variants are the KV-2, which had a 152mm howitzer. I mean, I'm not really sure if artillery will be in-game. I'm sure it will be at some point, but at launch, I'm not sure. I think it's safe to say there will be no KV-2 at launch, because it's just not that high priority, although it is a very novel tank design. And 152mm howitzer is just insane on a tank chassis. The next is the KV-1S, which is a lighter version and would be better for your full reel battle situations, as it had it had a commander cupola, so a lot better vision, and that will be key. I'd imagine that for full reel battles, this is also speculation. Viewports, commander cupolas will be in hot demand. You would sacrifice on performance issues for better I would imagine for better vision in most cases. Um, and then there's the other modification of a KV-85, which I would expect definitely to be in game. And then finally, there's not finally, but another one is the KV-8, which was equipped with flamethrower. And this brings up an interesting topic. Do you want to see flamethrowers in the game? This is a discussion. There's a lot of pros and cons to each, but given that you have more targets than just tanks, flamethrowers have a couple of effects, and these are my personal opinions. First of which, they are freaking awesome. Second of which, they look freaking awesome. Third of which, they actually have a practical usage, and that is what they were designed to do historically. Destroy fortifications, pillboxes, stuff like that. Heavily armed targets with those little slits where you could be firing at all day, and if you didn't shoot right through it, you wouldn't really be able to penetrate. So why waste your time when you can just roll up to it and flame that thing? Another thing, when you're on the battlefield and 1 or 2 kilometers away, you see this giant fireball erupt one of your pillboxes or fortifications or something like that, it'd be pretty awesome. It has some atmospheric effects. Another thing, it's another weapon system. And who doesn't like multiple weapon systems to be under your control? This would greatly increase replayability, player experience, and then also another thing, competitiveness. When you look at your competitor, if you have something that on all of its faces seems to be a good idea, and your competitor doesn't have it, right there is a good reason to implement it. So that's my personal opinion on it. So moving on, we have the Panzer IV. And if you look at this and you take a quick look, rewind back or go back to the beginning, that first screenshot, this thing looks near identical to that first Panzer IV in almost every detail. The cool things about this is that if you look from our view, not from the tank's point of view, but from our view, right to the left of that turret, right to the left of that high velocity cannon, that 75mm high velocity cannon, you can see smoke grenade launchers basically. And those things will be used, I pretty much imagine, because that would be another tactical outlet that you would have in game that would really just make tank gameplay really dynamic, more than just using a single cannon. You have a lot more tactical options at your disposal. Another cool thing about this is the sloped armor. Or excuse me, not the sloped armor, the spaced armor. I'm a huge fan of spaced armor. The Panzer IV with spaced armor, I don't know what it is. I mean, it could be just my nerdy days with Axis and Allies miniatures or something, and it being one of the first tanks I got. But it just looks really impressive, and I think spaced armor is pretty cool. But overall, that thing will be awesome. Another pretty interesting historical tidbit about the Panzer IV is that I think as a German tanker, you should expect the majority of German tank choices to be based off the Panzer IV chassis. Not to say all you have is Panzer IVs. You will have tons of options. But the Panzer IV was very versatile. It was easily customizable. There was many upgrades, many modifications, both in the field and in the factory. The Panzer IV chassis is a basis for many self-propelled guns, anti-aircraft tanks, Jagdpanzers, and assault guns. So this guy is gonna be rather prevalent in the German lineup. And then finally we have this screenshot, and I'm not entirely sure if this is real or not, but this is the Sturmpanzer One, which is based off a Panzer One chassis, and it is also nicknamed the Bison. It has a 15cm artillery cannon, and this kind of brings up a topic, and I'm not sure if this is a real screenshot or not. I mean, it could be faked, who really knows. But another thing is, at launch, do you think artillery will be placed in game? Do you want them to be placed in game? With World of Tanks, a lot of people are not really happy with artillery. A lot of people call them... There's a lot of less than nice terms that people associate with artillerymen in World of Tanks. So, first question is this real? Is this fake? What do you think and why? And the second is, do you want artillery in this game? I think if implemented properly, they definitely have a place, because when you look at the battlefield, there's more targets than just tanks. And that is what these artillery pieces were designed to do. So they would have targets, they would have proper targets. So if they be implemented proper, I'm all for it. Now, I've asked you a number of questions with regards to, do you want flamethrowers? Do you want artillery? Things like that. And here's another question. Do you want anti-aircraft vehicles, tanks, armored vehicles, and stuff like that? Do you want armored cars? I think the safe answer to most of those questions is yes, assuming they're implemented properly. But the fact of the matter is that we're going to get the War Thunder gameplay, the tank gameplay at IgroMir is going to be at a very, very early stage of beta. And a lot can change. And in fact, I'm pretty sure that Gaijin wants us to come up with suggestions. As a YouTuber, I find it easier to come up with really, really good content when I have a lot of good suggestions. So you can think about it at a much bigger level. As a game developer, you want to keep your fans happy. What do the fans want? And if they come up with good ideas, then why not implement them? So basically, yeah, what do you think? What do you want to see in the game? I mentioned flamethrowers. I'm a big fan of that. I mean, the Germans, Italians, Japanese, Americans, British, Russians, Canadians, and Dutch all used them, to name but a few. They were used effectively. So if you want to discuss this a little more than in the comments, there's going to be a link in the description for a Reddit post, because those are often pretty good conduits of discussion. So you can find a link there. Also, if you find more screenshots or YouTube videos, I have a link in the video description for my forum posting. So please, if you find something before I do, post it there. Another two quick announcements, or I guess one more announcement, is I played Full Real Battle with a joystick and Track IR, and that video is on Fly Daily's channel right now. And a link to that will also be in the video description. And finally, to wrap this all up, if you want tanks in War Thunder and you're happy that tank gameplay is going to be at IgroMir, hit that like button. And if you don't, hit that like button because you're drunk and you like being drunk. Anyway, I'm Baron. As always, thank you for watching. Alright, now we're going to hear the 50mm KWK, and this thing was fitted most predominantly on the Panzer III Ausführung L, or variant L, and we have a pretty nice screenshot for that. Now we have the 76mm ZIS 5.